Love it. Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Craig Domann. I've got a gentleman today, Ryan Romano. He's the cheese man.
Hey,
Ryan, welcome to Pro Mindset today.
hey, I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here and can't wait to see what rabbit holes we go down.
Absolutely. So you are a coach and speaker, and you help people expand their identity, maximize their performance, and develop their leadership. I can't imagine who wouldn't want that. So share with everybody just to give them a little bit of a taste of what that really means.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think let's understand like where that came from is especially like expand identity. I know like holistic development's kind of becoming, a little bit of a buzzword. And as a college athlete for me is, when I first got wrestling's my background. And when I first got to college is, like wrestling was my identity. And then I got there and the kid starting in front of me was the first true freshman NCAA All-American. And I was like, oh boy, probably not getting in the lineup anytime soon. And so it's like, then I began to like question everything, right? And as you know, like you start to go down that rabbit hole and you feel like everybody else has it all together. And so you're constantly comparing. And so I would say those 4 years of college was like a massive struggle for me because I didn't have the one thing that I had kind of sports and athletics to cling on to is that wasn't even going well, right? Like I wasn't getting in the lineup until my senior year. I wasn't performing at the level I wanted to. And so I think it served me at the time, but I kind of bought into the societal lie. I think it's a lie of, once you find your passion, then kind of everything else takes care of itself. And so I was like, hey, my dad had owned a company. It's like, I don't want to do that, right? Like I need to find my passion, right? Like this is going to bring the fulfill and the enjoyment of like in my life. And so, had a conversation with him of like, hey, like, I don't want to work for you. It's like at the time I was like, I think I want to build a gym. And he was like, all right, how are you going to do that? And I was like, that's question number 2. Can I use your basement? And so I went on this journey and started to have a lot of success in building a sports performance, strength and conditioning gym. And 2 or 3 years in, hit that rock bottom again, started to really question, who am I, right? Like, where's my value? Where's my worthiness? And that led to sadness, loneliness, depression. And then ultimately is kind of like, is life worth living for? And so I'll never forget, that's a whole separate story, but stumbled across a mentor and she's supposed to be a business coach. And I just remember her, she was like, something's off. Like, tell me about you. Who are you? And I was like, that's a stupid question, right? My name's Ryan. I'm CEO of blah. And like, I'm a coach. She's like, no, but like, really, like, tell me about you. I was like, thought I just did. She's like, I think we got to uncover this first. Right. And she was like, Ryan, I'm going to tell you something that like, if you want to change anything in your life, like you have to change who you are, right? You want better relationships, you have to shift. You want a better business, you want to grow your business, you need to shift. And you want to have fulfillment in life, then like you have to like shift in the lens and the perspective that you're looking at things through. And so we worked together for like 5 years. And so that really that changed everything in terms of how I started operating is I started to shift. And then I meet the woman of my dreams that I'm now like married to and have a child with. And so like, as cheesy, as corny as it sounds, is like, as I started to like find myself and be able to answer that simple yet difficult question of like, who are you? Everything externally started to shift around me. And so to kind of fully answer your question is like, as I go into teams, it's like helping them understand that like, you've probably been lied to a lot. Society will tell you, don't leave your friends if they've never done anything wrong to you. Society will tell you like all these different lies and rabbit holes that we can go down. But like ultimately is I kind of have this mantra is, you don't get what you want, you get who you are. And so it's like we can hope and wish and want and have all these big dreams. But if you're not becoming that person, if you're not the person, that's how they get up off the couch. That's how they respond to questions. That's how they interact with others. It becomes very difficult to accomplish your dreams. And so, like literally is meeting number 1, whether we're talking about team identity with a team or an individual they always know. I'm like, you guys know what questions coming. And they're like, yeah, we do. And then we sit down and I'm like, all right, like, tell me about you. And they always like, what do you want to know? I'm like, everything. And then they're like, where do you want me to start? I'm like, anywhere, right? Like they already know the question and they still don't have an answer. And so it's just helping them guide them down that path of, hey, there's all these things. And so I'm not going to give you anything new. I'm going to help you unlock doors that are already inside of you. I'm either going to show you where the key is, or I'm going to help you you already have the key, and I'm going to help you unlock some of those doors and discovering you. And then the performance and things like that will start to shape and mold and take care of themselves.
Okay, Ryan, that was awesome. So you went through an identity crisis in college.
100%.
You thought you had, just like I did and everybody else, you thought you had a plan, you thought you had it figured out. You were told this bill of, you basically sold this bill of goods that you work hard, you want it more, you'll get it.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up too, is if I'm introducing myself very similarly on a longer version, I'll literally start with, I'm like, raise your hands. How many of you feel like you're working your ass off and not getting the results that you want? And maybe not everybody, but most people. And I'm like, yeah, because like anytime you don't get what you want, it's like you're just fed this thing of like work hard, work hard, work hard. And so the analogy I give is like, if you have an electrical problem in your home and a plumber shows up, it doesn't matter how hard they work. It's going to be really hard for them to fix that problem, right? They can work day and night, but like they're not the right person, right? It's like you didn't call on the right person. And so a lot of times, and you can contest to this, is like those high level athletes is like most of them, I mean, some of them are a little bit lazy, but like most of them physically, it's like they'll do anything, right? Like they'll run the extra sprints, do the extra push-ups, stay after, but you ask them to like answer the question, who are you, or meditate for 10 minutes. And they're like, there's got to be another way, right? Because they've just been hardwired and ingrained, like work, 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 work. And then there's this frustration when they're not getting what they want. So 100% agree.
Well, I think the identity crisis, the instigator of it is when your circumstances don't match up with your dream. It's when there's a disconnection between what you were hoping for and what you're getting. And so what you just described about your audience people that, you ask them, hey, you've been working your butt off and unhappy with your results. The answer is absolutely, because they were hoping to get something else. But what I have found is that, I'm sorry, man, I just lost my train of thought. I got like right before this, I had a really awesome conversation and I'm still thinking about that one. Okay. Back to you. And Jose gets to edit this part out.
Yeah, no, you're good.
The identity crisis starts when you think who you are is what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So when you went to college as a wrestler, you thought you were a wrestler. No, you're a young man that is trying to figure things out that happens to wrestle. And what I find in sports is that everybody, and the reason why it happens is very honest and innocent. Mom and dad see the athlete as an athlete, see their son as an athlete, see their daughter as an athlete. If they're wanting to decompress and they go out with some friends, they see him as an athlete too.
Yep.
Everybody sees him as an athlete. So when they want to like take that cape off of being an athlete and just be a regular guy, the people that are the closest to them still see them as an athlete. Hey, how's practice today? How about the big game coming up? And so they keep getting pulled back into, I guess I'm just an athlete.
Right. Yeah.
I guess I'm just a wrestler who's not wrestling. You're practicing, but you're not getting to performing the matches if you're not the first guy. It's your weight class, right? So it's like, that's when the identity crisis shows up.
Yeah, it's interesting how many other people's labels become your labels, right? When they're constantly asking you about sports and everything else, it's like because that's all like, that's the input, right? Like that's just what the brain hears is like sports, football, wrestling, baseball, basketball, gymnastics, whatever it is. And so their labels ultimately become your labels. And so I'm sure you can contest to this is I had the privilege before I built or started the strength and conditioning gym is I interned down at IMG Academies. And I was fortunate enough when I was there to be down at the time when they were combine training. So when all the NFL guys were coming in combine training. And so people would always ask me is like, what do you talk about with those guys? What do you say? I'm like, anything but football. right? Like that's the first thing. This is like, if you're married, how's your wife, right? Like, how's your family? How's your dog? How's like, they literally just want to be a human being and they want to talk about like average, normal, kind of like everyday things of, you know, hey, that food was terrible. That food was amazing. Like, right? Like the silly stuff that we're like, like, I don't know what to say to this person, is they just bring up sports because they think that that's what they want to talk about because that's what they do all the time. But like you said, is like, they never get to take that cape off because that's the only thing that anyone ever talks to them about, and it just becomes irritating.
Well, I'm a normal sized guy, 6'2", 230. If a guy is 6'7", 7 foot, or he weighs 300 pounds, he can't go in a restaurant without somebody saying, who you play for?
Right.
Under 30. It's like they know he's an athlete. So I feel bad for the guys that look like Tarzan. I mean, the guys that look like freak shows.
Right.
Because they can never get away.
And then it's like with those labels is think like within that like identity crisis is the other like hardwired belief is they've been trained to, so I always label it as like doing, thinking, being, right? And so it's like, if you want to achieve X outcome, I always ask people, I'm like, what's the first question you ask? And they always say, it's like, well, what do I need to do? I'm like, yeah, but like, that's on the back end because I can say, hey, do you want to make $1 million? And they're like, sure. I'm like, great. Like I have this program. I've hired a coach. He's going to give you all the training tools and everything to make $1 million. Are you going to do it starting today? And they're like, probably not. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not that person. Right. And so it's like, ultimately is once you figure out what it is that you want over here, the first question should be like, who is it that I need to be? How do I need to operate? What's the perspective and the lens that I need to view the world through? Because I'm like, if you start being a different person, do you think you'll think differently? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, if you think differently, do you start doing differently? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, so just be careful of like the first question that you start to ask. And again, I think that's a little bit of a hardwired thing because I can think back, even my dad was a successful college athlete, wrestler too. And, you know, him coaching, what are you going to do? 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 And so that just gets ingrained in us is always like, okay, we got this goal. What do we need to do? And it, again, if you're the plumber and trying to work on the electricity, it's like, it doesn't matter what you do. It's like, you're still going to fall short and be frustrated, or it's going to take you a really long time, longer than it should, than if you just learned how to solve the electrical problem. And so just getting people to be mindful of that doing versus being, and always like, you got to be the person first before you actually go out and do.
I think it really hurts athletes when an athlete does exactly what you said. They embody the energy, the persona of being a champion, being a winner, being a leader, and yet they just transferred in.
Right.
Nobody, they come from another part of the country and nobody really knows their history. Now, today it's really easy to look it up. But back in my day, we wouldn't have known. But the coach automatically likes that player and moves them to the front of the line, puts them in the starting lineup, whatever the case may be. It's because they have the identity consistent with someone that should be the point guard or the coordinator, whatever it is. And so I think it really frustrates athletes when they work hard. They show up and they do everything they've got great standards of preparation and practice and all the other things that you have to do, but they don't embody the person they need to be. But somebody else does. And all of a sudden they're passed over by that player. So I see, especially with young people, that they don't know yet that they should even be. They're either it or they're not. They got the it factor, they don't.
Right.
Where with 20-something, 30-something-year-old athletes, they know. They're smart enough to know. They may not know what they're missing, but they know they're missing something. But a 12-year-old, they don't know. They're just like, I think they play the unfairness card.
Yeah.
This is not fair.
Yeah.
I haven't missed a practice.
They do it's interesting. That makes me think of, so I'm like a huge stickler on like definitions matter, because I think in sports, there's all these buzzwords, even like off camera before, you're like, like, how do you want to describe yourself? And it's like, I know to get in the room and talk to coaches and everything, you got to use the buzzwords because they like the buzzwords. But ultimately, it's like when you sit down and ask them, like, hey, how do you define that? It's like most people don't actually know. And so one of the buzzwords that kind of comes to mind is people think they have this high standard, right? They're like, hey, I'm doing all the things. My standards are X, Y, and Z. I'm like, okay, what's the definition of standard? And they're like, most people kind of don't, right? Like they don't really know. I'm like, okay, well, like if you look it up, it's literally just the average or bare minimum. So it's like if the team has, hey, this is our standard, what they're saying is like, this is the bare minimum required to be here. And a lot of people is, I'm stealing this. I'm going to give credit where credit's due. The assistant women's basketball coach at West Virginia, he said something super profound to me. And I think that there's a difference in checking the box and breaking out of the box. And he's like, I always try to get athletes to break out of the box. And I was like, man, that's really good, because I think so many athletes get caught up in like, hey, what's the standard? And they're like, yo, I'm checking all the boxes. What's the deal here? And if you're a high level coach, right, you're trying to achieve that, not even necessarily a championship, but break program records, take the team where it's never been before, or athletes doing things that they've never done, is you can't look at those standards. It's like, to be exceptional like means you are the exception, right? Like you can't look at those standards because then you just run parallel with everybody else. And so I think that's the fascinating piece. But then also is, like I said, is like most people have all these words. I have no idea what they mean. I can't tell you how many teams I've walked into. I'm like, non-physical, what's the number one thing that you guys want? And I would say without question, especially in female athletics, is 99% of the time, they say confidence, right? Like if I had confidence, I would achieve anything. I'm like, awesome, great. Let's write it on the whiteboard. I'm like, all right, give me the definition. And then I just get blank stares. I'm just like, so for 15 years, you've been after this thing called confidence. You have no concept of what you're even looking for. And so I always tell them, I'm like, that's literally like your parents sending you to the grocery store to buy apples and you have no idea what apples are. And they're like, okay, you're on to something. I'm like, yeah, we got to give these words meaning, you know? And it's like, I just don't think that they're challenged in that way. And I don't think it's like coach's fault, maybe a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, they don't clearly define either. It's like, hey, I need you to be a leader. Well, if you and I have two different concepts of like what leadership look like, and we define it, is 2 weeks later, you calling me in the office and you're cussing me out like, look, I told you I need to be a leader. And you're like, I thought I was, right? And it's like the lack of clarity on like how we define those things becomes super powerful. And so I know a lot of the athletes get frustrated with me with it, but I'm like, look, if you want to go to the next level, right? Like if you want to continue to grow and improve, is especially with this confidence thing, it's like, it's not some magical fairy dust. Like we just have to put context to it so that you can actually feel, because it is a little bit of a feel, like you can feel like that person that shows up. And so when somebody does ask you, hey, describe to me how you are as a competitor, you're like, I'm confident. And then somebody's like, how do you know that you're confident? It's like you have a definition so you can clearly define. It's like, because I have undeniable proof I am who I say I am, right? I show up every day, I do these things, blah, 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 blah. And so it's like, as I call it, like stacking your deck, is like all of a sudden you have all the cards to play. And so you surpass everybody else.
Okay, I want to dive into a couple things you said. One is the standard. I coach my clients on having a standard that's higher than anybody else's. So if you've got a supervisor, if you have a coach, you have a boss, you get to understand what their standards are, but then you have to choose a standard that's higher than theirs, whether it's timeliness, effort, doesn't matter what it is. Because if you fall short, which we all fall short at some point in time, you're still going to meet their standard. Where what I feel like happens is this like tug of war. Husband and wives do it. Coaches and players do it. It's like they say, hey, here's the standard. And so the players think to themselves, hey, I wonder if coach thinks this is the standard or not. I wonder if my, hey, he wants you to be to the meetings 5 minutes early. You show, 5 minutes and 15 seconds before. I wonder if that's okay. It's like, no, just get there 10 minutes before. That way you don't just eliminate that. So, if he says do 8 reps, do 8 reps. Don't look
Right.
around and see after 7. If nobody's looking, I'm just going to put it up on the rack and call it a day. So for standards, I feel like, and I've come up with about 10 different standards that I feel like are very like admirable. They're authentic. They're honest standards. Like, give it everything you got. There's a standard. Can you give more than you got? I can't.
Yeah.
Just give it everything you got. So, what do most athletes do? They don't give it everything they got.
100%.
They give enough so that they get kudos from their coaches for giving effort, and maybe they're successful, maybe they're not. So, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen like guys in football games chasing a guy down, and they realize at some point in time they're looking at the end zone, the goal line, looking at the runner, and they're looking at them, and they've got some spatial awareness that I'm probably not going to catch this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So they start veering off. They don't even finish the play.
Right.
They just don't want to be captured in the same picture with the dude crossing the goal line. Their standard is to save face.
Yes.
What happens if the ball's slippery and the ball falls out of the runner's hands before he gets to the goal line? You might be able to recover it. What happens if there's so many things that can happen?
100%.
And you eliminated yourself. And then the last thing I got about confidence. I have dived into confidence and belief, and keep in mind these are Craig's definitions. These aren't, Webster's dictionary.
Yeah.
I believe that belief is how you feel about you as a person, and confidence is how you feel about what you do. And so belief should always be 100%. Confidence should be contingent upon the work you put in, your previous successes, the evidence that shows up. I mean, if you're a 73% free throw shooter, you should be 100% believer in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence and the statistics say that you're a 73% free throw shooter. So if you want to become a better free throw shooter, there's things that you can do. Okay. So if coach says, hey, you got confidence, man, I got belief.
Yeah.
And I got confidence in my skills, but I'm not going to hit it 100% of the time.
Yeah. I like that. I want to go back to the standard thing again a little bit too. Is I think I was talking with, he was a high school teammate, and we have some good conversations, and he kind of helps me out with some of the teams. He'll just shoot them some little videos. He was West Point grad, Ranger qualified, so way tougher than me. And he just told a story, and I think that it's kind of resonated with a lot of the athletes too, is, to your point, is I think train above the standard and so he tells the story. He's like, when I was going to Ranger school, he's like, the standard was 5 miles in 40 minutes. And he goes, at the time I was living in Oklahoma, and it was whatever X month out of the year. And so he's like, I had to train for like 28 to 30 minutes when I was there, because I knew that when I was getting to Ranger school in Georgia, humidity was going to play a factor. They weren't going to feed me. My body wasn't going to be nourished. And so he's like, I had to build in this buffer, knowing, because he's like, if I trained for 39 minutes all the way through, he's like, I would have never made it. He's like, but I had to. He's like, so I trained for, we'll call it 30 minutes. And then he was like, all throughout the course, he was like, I was running 35, 36, 37 minute 5 miles. But he's like, it's because on the front side, it's like I had anticipated that. And so as an athlete, like, you train, you do the extra reps, you get there a little bit extra early, you do those things, because what if you're sick, right? Like, what if you're a little bit ill? It's like, that like, well, my 80%, because I lived at a higher standard before, is like my 80% is still good enough to win against somebody else's 100%. Or, especially college athletics these days, it's like everybody's beat up, banged up, kind of by the end of the year. But of course, we always think we have it worse, right? Like, anyone felt like us, they would be on the deathbed. But I think knowing is like, you tweaked an ankle a little bit, your back is acting up, like whatever it is. It's like, yeah, but like, I know I did that at a higher standard than anyone else, so that here on this side, it's like, I still have belief in myself that I can achieve X thing. It doesn't become an excuse for, I think you would agree with this, is like being a victim, right? It's like, well, if I had been healthy, and it's like, should have done more on the front side in terms of like standards.
Well, what you just described is when you train at a higher standard, you're creating a margin, almost a cushion, so that if you're having one of your off days, or the weather is what it is, or whatever it might be, you're still good because you've trained harder than you needed to, right? And so I think the hard part for young people in sports is they can't train without seeing the finish line.
So true.
Right? So I got to know where the finish line is. I got to know where my markers are, because they're going to get past that and then they're going to quit.
Mm-hmm.
But if, let's say, for example, we're all running and we're cross-country coaches or something, they say, how far do you want us to run? I want you to run until I tell you to stop running. Kids can't do that. I couldn't do it. That would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
How fast am I supposed to run if I don't know how long I'm going to run? So it's like, but that's the mentality you have to have, that you're not there's no finish line.
Yeah. So here, I'm curious too, is especially when you're talking about like if it's in the workforce, it could be standards with a boss. In your experience too, how many people like really know what they want? Because it makes me think about when you talk about like finish line and stuff like that. I feel like people lack a lot of clarity, or they're super vague, or they're super generic. And then that becomes super frustrating. So I'm also curious, like in your experience in conversations, whether it be just people in career or people in sports, like as you have conversations with them, how like super clear are they versus like being really vague?
I think everybody is very super clear about their dream and their big goals. I just had a conversation with one of my coach clients today. Very, very specific about where he wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the pathway to get there, the person he has to become to basically end up where he wants to be in his dream, he's not clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think there's we talk about the gold at the end of a rainbow. Everybody knows what that looks like, but we don't know the in between.
Yeah. 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 I'm interested, or curious, I guess is a better word, is feel like, at least, and maybe this is just experience with the teams and athletes I have, is like they actually struggle a lot with that end, because they have to see it to believe it. And so they're like, well, I have to see this first. And they can't even talk about that. And so actually an athlete literally had a conversation with this morning, is competed this past weekend, like didn't get a result that they wanted. And so I was like when we first sat down and I asked you what you wanted, like, what is it that you said? And it's basically like, I want to be in lineup. I want to be a starter. Right. And I was like, were you in lineup this weekend? Like, yeah. I was like, have you ever looked past like what you wanted that competition to look like? And you're like, not really. It's like, that's the thing. It's like, we're really good. I'll give another analogy. A coach, actually, the first coach that I ever had, the one that's like helped me discover, give her credit for this, because she's like, Ryan, what do you want? And so I had to describe it like a bunch of things. And she was like, 70 to 80, maybe even 90% of what you just told me is what you don't want. Right. And I think teams and people are really good. It's like, well, like last year, we don't want this to happen. We don't want this. We don't want this. We don't want this. And so she gave me the analogy. She's like, Ryan, when you go into a restaurant, you sit down, give you a menu, you look it over, the waiter comes over. It's like, hey, can I take your order? She's like, you wouldn't look at them and tell them everything that you don't want to eat on the menu. She's like, that would be foolish, right? And she's like, they'd write it down, the kitchen would cook it. Now you're sitting at a table of everything that you don't want to eat on the menu. And she's like, I feel like that you're living a lot like that. And I was like, man, that's so true. And so for me, it's like constantly making this distinction, because words matter, right? Like, am I languaging things in a way of like things that I don't want, or are these the things that like I do want to like show up on the menu, so to speak, the food that I want to like show up on the table? And then I think like part B of that is, I call it like painting the picture, like in conversations, is like, walk me through like what that looks like. Like, tell me, like, I have no idea. I'm stupid. I'm dumb. Like, really intrigue me to where it's like, I have no idea what your sport is, but like, it's going to sound amazing. And so I go back to the menu analogy, and I'm like, if you're going to order a cheeseburger, like, what's underneath like cheeseburger. And actually all of them say sides, but I'm like, no, there's a description of what that, it's like, 8 ounces of juicy beef seasoned this way on a buttered bun, right? It's like, it really makes it more intriguing. And so I was like, unless you just really wanted a hamburger, if it just said hamburger, you'd probably be like, but like, what do? They paint the picture, they describe it for you. They actually put a picture on there. It's not going to come out looking like that, but it looks amazing. So you're going to order it anyways. And so getting them to like make sure, A, you're placing the order that you want. And then B, like you haven't, like, what does that actually look like in your brain? So that, like, again, thoughts and feelings are 5 times more powerful. So it's like you can actually feel that internally of like, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be incredible. I can't wait for this to happen type thing.
Well, one of the things that you have brought to light is the concept of what you want versus what you don't want. And one of the things that I would add to that, because, we're all talking about the same thing, just different perspectives,
100%.
is destinations and processes. And so when I talk to people, I get a lot of destinations. I want to win. I want to start. I want to place. I want to get paid. All those kind of like destinations.
Yeah.
Where the people that I think grow the most and expand their abilities and increase their performances are the ones that focus on the process of becoming better at what you do, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, so that when you're in the middle of the competition, when you get thrown a curveball, when an official or a referee makes a call that works against you,
right?
Clock's working against you, when the opponent's bigger than your coach told him he was going to be, when he's quicker, if you're wrestling, he's got a move that nobody told you he had because he hadn't shown it.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you're dealing with it right here in real time. And you don't get to go over and, have a consultation with your coach and talk about it for 10 minutes.
Right.
You've got to be responsive. So when you're put in those like, almost like fight or flight moments, it's the process that saves you. It's not the destination.
Yeah. 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 And as you kind of touched on a little bit there too, is the process of who you're becoming, right? Like ultimately is, I think it's a Jim Rohn quote. It's like, 10 years will surely pass. It's not if, it's like, who are you going to be or where are you going to be like when that 10 years ends up? And I think a lot of people, to your point, they get so consumed with the destination or the end result or the dream outcome. It's like they forget that like there are all these wins along the way through that process of like understanding and knowing that like, hey, like I am becoming more. Again, I see this a lot in female athletes. I think women tend to do this. Everyone does it. I think women are probably a little bit more like guilty of it. Is when good things happen, I say you live in a yeah, but world. So every time something good happens, you're like, yeah, but, and then you discredit it, right? And you got 15 reasons of like why that should be discredited. And so through that journey and through that process, it's hard to have that belief, have that confidence when you've literally discredited literally everything. It's like anytime, again, going back to like words matter, is like when people are frustrated, they like so intense about it, right? Like so been frustrated in this, and they like get in the emotion of it. And then like when something like amazing happens, I'm like, how was today? They're like, good. I'm like, wow, that sounds exhilarating, And so it's like on one side, you've hardwired yourself to like affirm this is who I am. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. See, remember, you're always frustrated. You're always angry about the things. And then when anything good happens, it's just like, you're not good at locking those experiences in. You either A, discredit them, or like you don't use powerful words to just, well, I guess it was all right. I did what I was supposed to do.
That is an identity issue. In Pro Mindset, I talk about, we all have a story and it's our identity. And it's a story you tell yourself. It's not the story you tell others about yourself. It's not what you read in the media about yourself. It's not what your parents, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, none of that stuff.
Yeah.
The story is the dialogue you have between you and you. And so what I would venture to guess, and this is just a guesstimate, that when you have an athlete that has success and you ask them about their success or congratulate them and they deflect it and they go, yeah, but I struck out 3 times too, or I had these mental errors or whatever it might have been. It's their story. Their story, they don't even know it, but it's their story. And if they would go back and read their own story, they would be able to learn why they do what they do, why they think the way they think, and they could rewrite that chapter so that that would go away. And when someone says, hey man, Ryan, great job. Great job. Ryan goes, thank you very much. I put in the work this week. I followed the game plan. I put in the effort, just whatever it is, all authentic. It's all not bragging. It's affirming what someone says, which is a reflection of what was. As opposed to, I did this when I was in high school. People would talk for me. And so I got to a point where I couldn't talk for myself. And so it's like through athletics, we won state, we did a lot of positive things. And I did not learn how to talk for myself because I was almost like shy and embarrassed about our success. Well, that's not the place to be.
Right. And I'm interested, I'm intrigued too, like the more I'm in this game, so to speak, is so many people view things as like very black and white. It's either like humble or arrogant. I'm like, no, it's like you can be confident without being arrogant, right? You can have 100% belief and certainty in yourself without being arrogant. I would even go as far as to say, it's like, I even like encourage the athletes is like, you're not going to like, when an amazing thing happens is like, you're probably not going to go home and like talk to your roommates about it or your teammates. Cause like you want to tip to, maybe they had a bad day, right? Like you don't want to overwhelm, like you don't want to brag, you don't want to come off as that way. Like I get it. I understand that. But we also have to, you would go home to them and gripe and complain. Like you would have no problem with that. It's like, well, coach, this and today was just miserable. And like, I just felt like, I don't understand why we have to do all this conditioning, right? Like you have no problem griping and complaining. And so like, I encourage them is like, whether it be somebody else or like, but this is what I'm here for. Like you can literally pick up the phone and have a 10-minute conversation with me and literally just tell me, like, I'll just listen. Tell me how amazing today was. Oh my God, like I did this, because we need to practice that. It's not like inherently like who we are, because like you said, is like, we've been wired with all these stories that make us feel not deserving and worthy enough. And so when good things happen, we don't feel like we deserve to talk about it. We don't feel worthy enough to like really kind of brag about it, if you will. And so like, I encourage people is make that part of kind of who you are. It's like, there's a difference in like picking up the phone and calling me and like saying, oh my God, today was amazing. Then like making 7 Instagram posts about how amazing you are, right? Drastic difference of like trying to publicly announce like I'm amazing versus having a coach, a mentor, a friend, even a family member that being able to lock those good feelings in. Because like, again, if research says feelings are 5 times more powerful and we practice locking in, and ultimately what I say is like being addicted to the emotions that we don't want, then like we can just as easily get addicted to the emotions that we do want. But it's practice, right? Like it's just like anything else in life. It's like we have to like actually take the time, the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes to be able to lock those experiences in. And I think that's my challenge. That's my, I guess, kind of mission is to get people to understand that. I'll even say is probably an older crowd. Probably don't tend to do this with a younger crowd, but college, I'll ask them. I'll go into a room. One of the first questions I'll ask them too, I'm like, what's the number one emotion that you feel throughout your day? And I actually don't know in 5 years if I've got a different answer. Hands down, it's like stress, right? Or some form of stress, anxiety, overwhelmed. I kind of lump those a little bit together. And so I'm like, okay, so here's the question. If that's the number one emotion you feel every single day, this is going to sting a little bit, but are you addicted to a life that you don't love? And everyone's like, and I was like, just asking, something to think about, right? But I said, could we experience joy 51% of your day? Possible. I'm like, okay. So could we get addicted to a life that we truly love and we wake up and we experience? And it's like, that's true fulfillment on that side, not willpowering your way through 4 years of college, not willpowering your way through 30 years of a career. It's doing something that actually juices you and fulfills you. You got to feel that.
I love that. That's awesome. I want to go back to being seen. One of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with is they don't feel seen. It doesn't matter if it's corporate America, entrepreneurship, sports, not sports, doesn't matter what it is. They put in the time, they put in the effort, they do the work, and nobody recognizes them. And in sports, it really frustrates athletes when, let's say, for example, it's obvious to everybody that a certain player should be the MVP of the game.
Right.
And the coach recognizes somebody else for a different reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then they feel butthurt because they don't feel seen or valued. So seen might be synonymous with being valued. So you don't feel valued. And so here's the irony of what you shared earlier is that when you are shined on, a lot of times people, they can't take the shine. It's too intense. They don't feel comfortable. They almost need to have sunglasses on to be able to take the shine.
Wholeheartedly agree. Because I'll even ask, I'm like, when somebody gives you a compliment, does that make you feel weird? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, because it's like, it's not normal to you. But if somebody was like, I'm being dramatic here, but like if somebody's like, you're ugly, right? You're just like, thank you, right? Like, oh, I feel the same way too, right? Like, I look in the mirror and feel that the same way, right? And so but when somebody's like, oh my God, you're gorgeous, you're like, oh, thanks, appreciate it. It's like this awkward moment almost. But it's funny you say that about the word I wrote down is praise. And think a lot of, obviously athletes need this. They need, going back to your need to feel seen, need to feel heard. And that praise becomes like super powerful. And so like one of the things like I even like encourage coaches, and sometimes they have this fear, right? Well, if I praise, do they get complacent? And I'm like, honestly, like, no, because they're deprived of it. So it's actually going to be more motivating for them because it's, if you're the girl and like you get all did up because you're going out to dinner and your boyfriend's like, oh my God, you look amazing. It's like, you want to hear that, right? It's not going to be like, all right, well, sweatpants and Ugg boots it is for now on life. I got the one that I want. It's like, no, like I want to get that. So it's like, I'm going to dress up more, right? Like I want to feel, it feels good. And so encouraging them, especially, interesting in sports is I'll usually ask coaches, I'm like, when's the best time to praise? And kind of confused, and most of them like in the moment, like right when it happens. I was like, it's not a bad time. I said, but also, like if they were walking out of the building and you're like, hey, like hold on 1 second. Like I got to tell you something. You're amazing today, right? And then I was like, you could really double down on it is like, what if at 8:00 at night, practice has been over like 5 or 6 hours, and I got a text message that just said, hey, I just like really want to acknowledge like you worked your butt off today, and like that was awesome. Like I like whatever it is, right? It's like 6 hours after breath. Oh, man, he's thinking about me, right? And it's just fascinating, like the timing of it too, how much more like the intensity that they can feel it. Like, man, that was like super meaningful. Or getting to write coaches is like, there's an exercise that I do that has to do with sticky notes, whatever. But like getting them, it's like you could put a sticky note in somebody's locker. And if they see that, it's like, oh my God, you took all 15 seconds to write 7 words on a sticky note and stick it in my locker, right? It's totally different than you telling me, after practice. It's those little tweaks that like totally change the game, and especially like relationships, because I think the intensity of feeling seen multiplies, right? It's like, not only do they tell me that after, like before or after practice, it's like they took the time to, write the sticky note. I mean, it's one of the things.
Here's what I would summarize what you just said, Brian. If you want to make a positive impact in the change of the identity of your athletes, I'm talking to coaches now. If you want to up-level their identities, when the crowd goes home, after the noise is like settled, praise then is going to make the biggest impact on your athlete, because you're the only voice they hear. In the moment, it's great, but everybody's patting them on the butt and saying great job and high-fiving them and everything else, right?
Yeah.
And then, grandma or grandpa or whoever level it is might be taking them out for ice cream after the game, or whatever it is. And so it's just facing the crowd at that moment.
That's good.
But like, you wait till the next practice, let's say it's the next day or next game, whatever the case may be. And you start out the practice by recognizing that athlete in front of the whole team for what they did the day before, and everybody knew they did it.
Yeah.
But now it's like it's got a deeper impact because of the time element. And now the athlete hasn't done that in a minute, it was yesterday or whenever it was,
right?
Because the little voice is going, maybe that's who I am. Maybe that's just the way I play. Maybe that's just, that's my jam. Where contemporaneous to the play, they're still trying to process it.
Yep. It makes me think of going back to, just jotting down, it makes me think of going back to earlier when we talked about like labels, is they start to believe good labels. Right? Like, you start to hardwire them. You can call it manipulation. I don't think it's bad manipulation, but it's like you're getting them to see themselves at a different level than they did, their perspective of themselves, their feeling of value and worthiness, because they start to hear those type of labels of like, you're amazing, you give great effort, right? Like, I want to, whatever you're recognizing and praising is, again, it's not something you would do every single day, right? Like, but at the same time, it's like, I'll quote Hitler. It's a little extreme, but right? Like, it's like, you say something loud enough and long enough, people start to believe it, right? And obviously an extreme example, but I think like coaches and teammates and leaders and anybody, you can use that power to your advantage, because it's like you're giving them labels, but it's giving them labels that, it's genuine, it's authentic, you actually believe it. You're not trying to like there's not an ulterior motive that you're trying to get them to do something that only benefits you. It's like, I want you to see yourself how I see you. So it's like, I'm going to tell you over and over and over again so they can look in the mirror and see that version of themselves.
Well, words matter and labels matter.
Yeah.
And our identity matters. And the way that we can make the biggest impact on other people's identities is the words we use, the labels we make or that we share. And I don't see it as manipulation. I see it as molding.
That's good. Yeah.
If you think about being a coach or a father, you want to mold your kids. You want to mold your team in a certain way. You want them to be better people. You want them to be better teammates, less selfish, more team-minded, more team first. In a perfect world, you want a bunch of players that are courageous and confident to make the play when they need to make the play. And in basketball, so many players are afraid to shoot when the game's on the line. It doesn't matter the sport. They don't want to take the shot.
Yeah.
It's like, I want, the first person that has an open shot that they've shown that they can make in practice, I want them taking the shot.
Yeah, I totally agree. As actually talking about words too, I was reading this the other day, but we hear a lot about like, we become the people that we're around. And like, I think the step below that is, typically when we're around people, we start to like adopt their vocabulary, right? We talk like them, we use words, right? We use phrases, catch slang, whatever it is, right? And so if words drive an emotion and we start to use their words, then their emotions become our emotions. Right. And so it's like, now it becomes even more of a mindful game, because it's like, oh, you talk like Susie. And it's like, okay, now I need to take a step back, because Susie feels stressed and anxious her whole life. Right. Like, and I'm using those phrases. It's like, super, like, it's just kind of scary, like how the human brain operates, right? And so I think, making sure that sometimes it's hard to get an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old to like understand that. But like, what I always tell them is like, you can literally be a decade ahead of me, right? It took me like till I was like 27, 28 to like really figure this out. And so like, and I had to go to rock bottom, like literally questioning life. I was like, you're actually in a good place. Like you can either be in rock bottom and learn, or you can also learn on top of the mountain, right? Like you can learn in joy and happiness and exhilaration. You don't have to wait till you're sliding. And so it honestly, it makes me think of too, like when I have some individual meetings with athletes and I'll be like, how are things going? And they're like, everything's so good, blah, 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 blah. And they think that that's just going to kind of be the end of the conversation. It's just like, awesome. Yeah, keep doing your thing, whatever. And I go, but why? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, why are you having success? And they're like, I've never really thought about that. I was like, is it probably going to take a slide at some point? Like it's going to start to, you're going to get stressed. You're going to have school. You're going to have all these things and you're going to feel overwhelmed. And you're going to feel like it's going to deteriorate. And they're like, 100%. I was like, okay. So if you don't understand why, it's going to be really hard to get back to that place. But if we can learn like why it is that you're having success, whatever, how you're living, whatever it is, the conversations you're having, the people that you're around, it becomes really easy to take inventory of like, okay, I'm sliding. What's going on? What am I doing differently than before when I was having success? And so again, it's just like, they're really good at telling me why things aren't going good. Well, this. And then they're winning. And I'm like, well, why are you winning? No, we should figure that out. Because I think that they think, and you've probably experienced this too. It's like one of the like early concepts is like, it's like, I'm not a doctor that's here to like fix you when you're sick. It's like, how are we like proactive about things so that when things are going good, it's like, we're going to keep hitting that button over and over and over again. So we continue to climb. It's not like things are going well. So you just put it neutral. No, like when we figure out why you're doing things, it's like, we're going to keep it. We're not going to like blinders on. We're not going to focus on anything else. It's like, we're just going to keep hitting that button over and over and over again until we feel like that's kind of maximized the area that we're going. And then we'll start to adjust strategy from there.
I think the easiest place to see the justification, the reasoning and whatnot for why you're doing or how you're doing what you're doing is when things are going really, really well or really, really bad. And when things are kind of in the middle, when you might be sliding down or progressing up, it's really hard to grasp for most people. Mm-hmm. But when you're at the top, if you just push the pause button for a minute, you know why you got there. You know the sacrifices you made. You know the standards that you executed. You know how you showed up for whatever you were showing up for. And when you're doing poorly, we know what we did. We know, right? So the learning is really on the edges. And then, I think your point is very true. Everybody learns and teaches how to climb the mountain, but very few people talk about how do you stay there or how do you get to the next one.
Yeah. And well, it's funny. People that are trying to get to the top of the mountain, I'm like, you think that's going to be the most freeing place, but the wind blows strongest at the top of the mountain. So when you get there, you think you have fear. Now go win a championship and then we'll have a conversation because you're going to feel even more overwhelmed. And I don't say that to scare you or discourage you of trying to go there, but like, don't lie to yourself that like, I'll be free when I get there, because that is not reality, right? Like you can contest to this is in my experience, or agree, disagree, is in my experience talking specifically like with NFL athletes. It's like the number one, like I'm gonna say one of the top things that they're overwhelmed about is like, now that they have all this money, everyone starts to appear. Everyone wants favors. Everyone wants X, Y, and Z. And so it's like, man, I thought when I got here, it's like, it would be freeing. And it's like just the opposite. And if you don't have, in that scenario, it's like, if you don't have a strong enough identity, if you're the people pleaser, you're whoever, it's like, you're just dishing out money left and right because you feel bad about telling people no, or they try to guilt you into giving certain things. And it's like, the total misconception of like, well, when I get there, everything will be good. And I'm like, I don't know.
Once you get there, everything gets harder. Every crack in your character is magnified once you get there. Every like relationship that has a little bit of a crack, it becomes fractured in most cases. And so it really accentuates, magnifies the negatives.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I like that.
It stinks for the guys. It stinks because they thought they had this like home base. They thought they had this like safe harbor, and it's not what they thought it was. But it isn't really revealed until they have a lot of money and they've got this fame and they've got these opportunities. Then all of a sudden they realize, hey, I can't trust that person like I thought I could.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to stop. We've been going here for a minute. I want to ask you one more question.
Yep, let's do it.
What is your framework or your system for identity expansion? So let's say, for example, I'm struggling, trying to figure out who I am, not really sure, how to get to where I want to go, may not even be really, really clear about where I want to go.
Yeah.
And the most important part of it is me. And you communicated it very clearly in the beginning of our podcast that the common denominator in every situation you're in is always you. Your career, your health, your finances, your relation, everything. It's you. So if you change one small thing about you, it's going to change everything that you do or everyone you're with. So when you talk to people, what do? You do an assessment? What's your identity expansion program?
Yeah. So to what you said before is, I think you're right. Step one is before we get there, like, what is it that you want? And like research shows that like 67% of people don't actually know what they want. I would even venture to say it's probably more than that. And so it's really first honing it, like, what do you want to order off the menu, right? Like, you're at the restaurant, you get to pick what it is that you want. I call it like a dream outcome or a single mission focus. And so it's like, what is your mission for you personally? No team exists. What is it that you want? What is your dream outcome? And so, and again, getting them to like paint that picture of what that looks like, because then it becomes really hard. Is, like I always say, it's like who you are. If you want to be a national champ versus you want to be top 50, it's just a different way of living, right? And so I think getting that clarity first of, what is your dream outcome? What is your mission is like so critical to the game. Now, in terms of kind of answering your question a little bit more, is I always say it's like, I call it like two worlds. And it's really hard for people to make decisions when they don't have contrast, right? And so I think that's why I lead with the question of like, who are you? Tell me about you, right? Like in like poking and prying and, 8 out of 10 times people are crying, right? Because it just becomes a vulnerable situation. And so the analogy that I use is, if you open up Google Maps and you're going to go somewhere, so we get really clear on what we want. If you're going to open up Google Maps, what's the first thing you have to put in? Like 90% of the people are like, your destination. I'm like, what's the bar above your destination? And they're like, your current location. I'm like, right? Now here's the catch with that is, has to be an honest current location, because if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, and you punch in your current location, Boise, Idaho, and you're trying to go find Chick-fil-A around here, it's not going to be that helpful. And so encouraging them when we're building out this, who are you right now? It's like, you got to open up, right? And getting them to understand why that's so important, because then I usually get people to name it, right? So when I tell my story, there was anxiety Ryan and achievement Ryan. There's these two worlds, okay? And once we can build out contrast as they're making decisions along the way, as they're building, and if something needs, it makes decisions really easy, because if they're like, I need to make a decision about X. I'm like, okay, what would achievement Ryan do? This is super clear. I'm like, yeah, we have contrast now of like, who are the two people we're operating as, versus I think most people is they interlock these two identities. And so it's just really confusing. They're like, well, I think I'm being achievement Ryan, but I'm not really sure. It's like, I don't really know if they would do this. And so I literally, down to what they're wearing, how they get off the couch, right? Like literally everything. How does this person operate, so that we can know everything along the way 99% of the time, it's like when they're frustrated, I'm like, tell me how you're acting. And it's like, oh, you're just being anxiety Ryan, right? Or whatever they name themselves. And so it just helps them visually see it that like, okay, once I have contrast, it's like, now I know based off of like where I want to go, exactly how I want to operate. So that would be kind of generically like where we would start and get going.
I like that. I like that. Without contrast, you can't see anything.
It's just a big blur. Like you literally, you don't, and then you ask, you're like, are you being, you know, the low version of you or the high version of you? You're 1.0 or 2.0. And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, exactly. We got to pull those worlds apart. And I think that that's become so critical and like with team dynamics too, right? It's like, all right, let's pull those worlds apart so that when things aren't operating at a level, it's like you can literally take a step back and it's like, okay, like have these two worlds to look at. Oh man, we're about 50% only living over here. It's like, all right, great. Like now we know exactly where, like how to show up. To me, especially young adults, one of the hardest things for them to do is to make decisions. Like how many times do you sit in the car with your roommate, 45 minutes later, you finally decide on Chick-fil-A, right? It wasn't that drastic, right? Or an hour and a half later, you're still scrolling Netflix, trying to figure out what you're going to watch, right? Like it's really hard for you to make a decision.
How often do you go into a restaurant that, you order, let's say it's Mod Pizza or something like that. You order and then you pay when you're done and then you go sit down, but you can't order because there's 3 people staring at the menu and can't figure out what they want. And you knew what you wanted before you got out of the car in the parking lot. But these people are, you don't know whether to be rude and say, do you mind if I jump in there?
Yeah.
The dude that's working behind the counter is like bored waiting for somebody to order, and you know what you want, but they don't know what they want. And I think the other, I don't know what, I've never been this way, but people are like this. They look at a menu in a restaurant, sit down restaurant, and they get paralyzed. Oh my God. Just order something. I'm usually hangry when I get in there. So I'm
Yeah.
But it's like, you don't have to study or memorize the menu. Let's go.
And to that point too, because I think it circles back to identity is honestly, as corny as it sounds, it's like I get them to practice that. Like if your boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, like, hey, where you want to go eat tonight? Like, how quickly can you make a decision? Right? Like how fast versus I don't care, like whatever, right? It's like learn to practice those things in other areas of your life, because as they say, decide, if the Latin root means to cut off. And so once you decide on something, you've cut off all other options. And I think there's that fear element, right? Like if we decide we're going to have pizza, it's like, can't have anything else, right? If we decide we're going to watch the show, it's like, we don't get to watch anything else. And so they like, it's the FOMO, right? It's like, whoa. And so they just, to your point, they literally sit there paralyzed because they're like, I don't want to lose out on everything. I got to pick the perfect options. Like, just choose something.
You can go back the next day and get something else.
Or order 2, right? Like,
that's one home.
Get the pizza and like get the Mexican food on the way home as well.
Well, I do think that the most successful people are decisive. And it doesn't mean you can't change your mind, but you got to be decisive. And you could make a decision on that, silly example about going to where you're going to go eat. And you could literally almost be to where you're going to go and change your mind. But that's one decision. That's one change. And that's not a big deal. What I see happening is when people can't make a decision, they're making it about 20, 30 decisions. Oh, we could go to these 20. No, just decide on one and go.
Yeah.
And if you change your mind on the way there, that's okay.
Well, and you think about like just going into people in general I agree. People think that if they make a decision, it becomes permanent. And unfortunately I think that's how the majority of the world lives, maybe in the United States, but like with career, right? They like choose a job and they're like, oh, like I'm stuck with this forever. I'm like, you can actually leave anytime you want, right? Like you can find what actually fulfills, like, but they're like, no, like I made this. I'm like, it's like, you're really not, like, you didn't make the decision. You're not a tree, right? Like you didn't get rooted into the ground.
Okay.
And, like,
I'm going to I'm going to wrap this up by wrapping this all back to the beginning. When what you do is who you are, you do become paralyzed. You can't change because you feel like if you change companies or change careers or change jobs, you're changing. No, you're just working somewhere else. You're still you.
Yep.
You can still be who you are.
And probably growing.
And more challenged.
Yes. Yes.
Ryan, I want to thank you very much for being on Pro Mindset today. I enjoyed our conversation. I hope you did too.
Loved it. Appreciate you.
All right, brother. Hey, everybody that's listening, thank you very much for tapping in today. Ryan, if somebody wants to check you out, find you, we'll have it in the show notes.
Awesome.
Just share with everybody what you got.
Yeah. So website would be UPI, Underground Performance Institute, UPItraining.com, or probably the place I'm most consistent would be Instagram, which is just at Ryan Romano, or Facebook, Ryan Romano. So those are probably the two most consistent places I exist.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody go out and have a great day.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.